Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Thrice called Palms. But when it comes to a band like Thrice, I am not going to be talking about them alone. It's simply too much history to get into this directly. So I'm going to be teaming up with my buddy that I've actually teamed up with before twice, although in a slightly different setting. Please welcome on board Crash Thompson, the Rock Critic. How's it going, man?
Hey, Mark. How's it going, man? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Honestly, this is one of those bands that with the storied discography, just in terms of the history with the band, even post-hardcore as a genre, I didn't want to feel like I was completely out of my depth. I might as well bring in somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about.
Hey, absolutely. I'm happy to oblige, man.
So, okay, can you give me a little bit of your experience with Thrice going into this release?
My experience with Thrice, with this release specifically, I was huge on their last album, To Be Everywhere Is To Be Nowhere. That album came about this close to being my record of the year. Absolutely stupendous return to form from the band. That was their return record. They had been gone for a long time. They reunited, came back reinvigorated, just recharged. It felt like almost a completely different band from what we had back in the early 2000s and whatnot. So
For sure.
Oh, absolutely. I was huge on the last record. So going into this one, I was kind of expecting a bit more of the same. I was expecting that same energy, that same passion, that same bravado that made the last record so astounding. I was super pumped for this. This was one of my most looked forward to albums of the year. I was really looking forward to seeing what we would get out of this, and I was surprised. Surprised.
Before we get into that, I'll give you a little bit of my
Okay.
experience when it comes to this. Because I was not huge into Thrice growing up at all. Like, I will freely admit I've got a little bit of distance with post-hardcore just in terms of getting into the genre as a whole. Paradoxically, though, going through Thrice's back catalog, a lot of their stuff in the 2000s, to a lot of the more experimental stuff, that whole Alchemy quartet they put out.
Oh, yeah.
Then they kind of went back to a more alternative rock vein, which I actually kind of liked a lot, because I think my favorite album of theirs is Beggars.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a weird choice, especially when it comes to, like, Vihesu, and, like, there's other albums that many people will have cited. Even their comeback record in 2016, I wasn't crazy about it. Like,
Really?
I wanted to like it a lot more than I did, because I think the production was on point. It felt visceral, but it also felt very scattered to me. Like, it was going in a lot of different directions, almost like they were coming back onto the scene. They had to prove they could do so many different things and get political at the same time. And
you make a good point there. But then again, 2016, everybody was trying that. So pretty much,
True, but they were going political in a different direction that a lot of people in that lane were, and arguably it kind of saved them from sounding as dated as a lot of that music does.
Exactly. It was, like I say, it was bold for them to try that because again, like they're known for tackling heavier lyrical themes, but they never got quite that heavy. They never got quite that intense and that like socially relevant. Like. I don't know, a lot of their stuff felt a bit more intrinsic, a lot more personal, and that record...
philosophical points, too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And again, that record, I can understand, like, why... Again, especially for someone like you, who was new and decided to, do a lot of backdigging, I can only imagine what that was like, because Thrice, it has such a... Like, their whole discography is a bit scatterbrained when it comes to things, especially the farther back you go.
But the hilarious thing, like, and this is the thing that I'm seeing, especially when it comes to this album, because you know what? It was a change of pace, but the change of pace I would describe it as being very much of, it felt more cohesive in a weird way. But I'm not sure it has the same highs.
See, yeah, exactly. It has a much more sort of tight focus. It is a more focused record. It has sort of a more sort of definitive ethos behind it. Again, we're going back to a bit more of the personal, the more looking inward, In a way, this album, the way it feels a little stripped back in places, the way they sort of shrugged off a lot of the, the heavier, just the tsunami of sound that they had on their last record. The way they kind of scale that back here, it almost feels like they're trying to apologize for To Everywhere Is to Be Nowhere. I don't know, as someone who loved that record, I'm just sitting here saying, no, don't apologize. You guys did great. Just keep doing that. But
the hilarious thing I noticed is that I started doing a couple of reading through some of the interviews, and two of the main influences they cited, and ones that when I heard them, I'm like, this makes sense, but I'm a little surprised they're your influences here. Radiohead and Beach House.
I can totally kind of see that here. Because again, like they're taking more bold risks. Not even bold. They're doing, like, again, things like the piano is much more, this record has, it's not oversaturated, but there's a much stronger emphasis on piano, on synths, on sort of smoother melodies, on non-traditional song structures sometimes. It's, like, again, they're they're working outside the box and they're thinking outside the box with this record, which I appreciate for sure, but these
it
guys
feels
aren't
colorless.
It does, yeah. These guys aren't Radiohead. They don't have the sort of dynamic ability to make that work, At least not to the same effect that Radiohead would. These guys are good at power. These guys are good at crunch. They're a good post-hardcore kind of band, and this album is.
It doesn't feel post-hardcore to me.
It's not hardcore at all, very much.
Because it kind of puts in this weird area where I keep going back through this. I'm expecting there to be a little bit more gristle, a little bit more wild changes in time signature, or less traditional song structure, or even instrumental passages that felt more challenging. And there's a lot of passages that they get some pretty impressive tremolo riffing that will be more of a post-rock vibe, but I don't think we wanted to hear a post-rock Thrice.
See, yeah, exactly. That's a good way to describe this album. It's not what we wanted to hear out of these guys.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's bad, and I applaud the willingness to experiment, and again, the willingness to go outside of what Thrice can and should be, but it's just not that effective. This isn't a sound that looks... This isn't Thrice at their best. This isn't a sound that really works. Again, there are tracks on this thing I like. There's stuff I like. There's stuff that's less effective. I don't hate this record, but man, they're just not... I get what they were going for, and they're just not at... They're not as good as it. They're not as good at it as I think they are. Like... See,
I would agree with you there. Let's get into some individual tracks here.
Okay,
like
sure.
The one that really starts off with Only Us, and you know what? I'm going back to their back disc catalog, and I'll say this: for as much synthesizers and keyboards that Thrice has integrated in the past, this feels like they're not a band that's getting swallowed by the Imagine Dragon.
Oh no! Thank God for that.
No, but I can see elements of that, like you can in some of the synth tones, some of the atmospherics that they use, especially the further deeper you get into the track listing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that opening track, I don't know what the hell they were going for with that necessarily.
I kind of liked it.
No, again, I don't hate it, but again, it's this very beepy boopy synthesizer lick, which I thought, ooh, okay, we're getting kind of synthesizer-y, but then they never follow up on that. That's the only track that gets that, electronica-y.
Well,
so
the Dark tried for parts of it, and then they brought in that, apparently they got a bunch of people on their cell phones to send in, a massive cloud of backing vocals, which honestly did not sound all that impressive.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. I didn't really... I mean, that's an interesting way to approach it. That's a cool way to get the fans involved, but I didn't even know that until you told me, and I listened to that track a good 5 or 6 times, so...
Yeah, it's not one of my favorites, honestly.
Yeah, points for effort. Points for effort.
But that's the thing. You get instrumental passages that just go in weird places. Much deeper. You get, I think it was Blood on Blood, where you get that weird strings passage that comes in out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, and then it just kind of...
It doesn't build.
It doesn't build. It doesn't have any effect. Again, strings. Strings was another element that they did utilize in the last record.
Absolutely.
Too good effect. And again, and it's not like they couldn't have done it well here. Even a lot of these songs, I feel like they could have structurally worked. But it's just... I don't know, the execution is just kind of off. It's a very off-center feeling record. It's a very just...
It's a left.
Close but no cigar. Yeah.
So, okay, what do you think actually works on this album? Thrice, like in terms of like individual solo cuts?
I dropped my notes, but so forgive me. I might be like, oh, that one song, but The Gray. Was absolutely great. That was a perfect first single to just throw out there. The Gray. Again, I like The Gray, but I like it mostly because it reminds me of more classic Thrice. It's one of the few tracks that does sort of, have that edge to it. It has that punch. It has that panache they're so good at. And again, I was that was the first single they dropped, so it colored the album in a way that I thought, oh, okay, this is what we're gonna get. This is what this experience is gonna be like. And
there are cuts in the track listing that have that, like A Branch in the River and Hold Up a Light, the 1-2 punch there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it doesn't follow up. Again, I would have loved more of that. And again, you mentioned "Hold a Light." That's that's another one of the that's one of the songs where the newer elements, especially the piano work and whatnot, is actually used to good effect.
Well, it had a grunge vibe to it.
Exactly, it had like sort of a mellower, kind of grungy sort of thing going on. And again, there are tracks on this thing where the sound, the direction they were going for, actually is effective. Again, I dropped my notes.
That's all right.
But there are tracks where it's super effective. But again, for every, I don't know, it feels like for every one track they nail it on. For another one, it just comes off as kind of bland, kind of colorless. You mentioned "Branch in the River." That song put me to sleep.
Honestly, Branch in the River was one that actually clicked a little better because it had a little bit more groove and intensity, a little faster to My Soul was the song that put me to sleep.
Yeah, I was out by My Soul. My Soul is definitely, it's definitely below Thrice's normal grade. Actually, by the time we hit My Soul, the album becomes very, very hit and miss. I
think it ends pretty well.
I forget how it even ends.
It's Beyond the Palms. Like it's definitely playing for more of a balladier ending, which I think is a weird choice for Thrice.
For Thrice,
yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it sounded really pretty.
And it feels appropriate for this specific album in the direction that it's trying to take, but I wasn't as impressed. Again, it's Thrice. Thrice at their worst moments. Thankfully, Thrice doesn't tend to get too face palmy or cringy or Thrice has never had their Saint Anger moment or anything like that. But when Thrice at their worst tend to be just kind of mopey and kind of humdrum and kind of boring and kind of whatever, this album had a bit more of that on it.
The funny thing is I made a comparison to late 90s Foo Fighters. After The Color, the Shape.
Yeah, and I can see that there too. Actually, our buddy Ethan actually brought it up on Twitter. He said that the production here sounds really sloshy and really just kind of nothing pops, nothing has a lot of vibrancy, and I can agree with that. I can see the kind of parallels there. There isn't a striking force. There isn't something that sticks out the most, the guitars rage, or the pianos are glorious, or the drums just punch or just knock you out.
I want to lay on the drums for a second here. They sound really closely mic'd.
I agree.
A little flat.
A little flat. I'd say definitely a little flat. Flatter than they were on the last release. On the last release, they were just all over the shop. But
now let's just pose to you this question here. Do you think that, because I know you agree that it's a little bit more colorless and a little bit more mushy and sloshy, but when it comes to the lyrical content, where it's specifically a lot of it is more abstract, it's focusing in on maybe not living within the polarization, but living within and becoming comfortable with the flow and the gray in the middle. You could almost say that the production echoes what it's trying to do lyrically.
Again, and points where they're due if that's what they were trying to accomplish. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's our job to listen to something and see if it's exciting and fun. And
this didn't quite get there.
Yeah, points for being good art school students, but it's not a great rock record.
Okay, let's dig into a little bit. I got two more points I really want to touch on here. Okay. Now, one thing I've noticed is that when you have bands, and I've seen this specifically on bands that trended a little more libertarian, coming on some of their themes and ideas.
Oh yeah, that's
But
definitely
now,
Thrice.
in the current political climate, they've trended towards a very middle brow, live in the gray, let's get along.
See,
period.
yeah, I caught that. I caught that, especially since their last album, again, was so
So fiery.
It was so fiery. It was so, again, it feels like it's almost an apology of sorts for that record. It's almost like, oh, we're sorry we got so angry. We're sorry we got so loud. Because, a big lyrical theme here is, again, just coexisting, finding middle ground, coming to peace. And there's an element to that I can definitely relate to. We live in very politically volatile times, just volatile times altogether.
Yep.
I can understand wanting to just find, if you've ever spent any time on Twitter, believe me,
Find your center.
Find your center. I understand wanting to, I understand the whole let's give peace a chance, a mentality here. And, again, it's sort of, it's effective. Their lyrics are very, I found a lot of the lyrics to be
poetic.
very, poetic, very well constructed, very touching in places. Let's say Dustin Kensrue has always been a really good lyricist in my opinion. But again, because they're heading towards let's sing Kumbaya has never really given us a lot of good rock material necessarily.
Yeah, especially coming from this band.
Especially when their last album was so fiery and so passionate.
Okay, so let's ask the question. Can we blame Epitaph for this? Because they changed labels with this album.
Yes, they did. Potentially. I'll bet the shift in label, because I'm pretty sure they used to be on Vagrant. And
they were on Vagrant for a while, but here's the thing. They still produce this record.
Yes.
So I'm curious how much of this became a studio note, or in terms to trend towards a specific sound, or how much of it was driven out of Thrice's own drive here.
I'll bet a lot of it was probably out of Thrice's own drive, and I mean, if they had been signed to a major label, I'm sure they would have just probably neutered them completely. We would have gotten something, we wouldn't have gotten nearly the kind of boldness we got on this album. It would have been even worse. But again, Epitaph is a bigger label. They're a more, especially these days, they're a bit. I don't know. They're not like Warner Brothers or anything, but it's still, I could understand. It is a bigger conglomerate. It is a bigger sort of entity that may have had a hand in things. At the end of the day, though, I still think the band probably had enough creative drive to do what they wanted on this record. And
that's the vibe I'm getting from the interviews that I read. I just typically spending with Epitaph, given how much the label has changed since the punk years into post-hardcore into what they're doing now.
Oh yeah.
It was
crazy.
An interesting, poignant question.
It's understandable. The Epitaph of today is very different from the Epitaph of 20 years ago. Not to say.
Absolutely.
Let's say Brett Gurewitz has kept himself very busy.
So, okay, Crash, what would you actually give this review in terms of a score? I know we're on different systems here.
Yeah, since I usually do an out of 5 system, I would usually go. For this one, I'm going to go about 3.5 out of 5. That would be about a 7 out of 10 for you. Again, there's a lot about this album that it does right. I love, it has its stronger moments. I love how willing to think outside the box they were on this release. But man, it's missing punch. It's missing identity. It doesn't have much of a face. Even though one of the best songs on this album is called The Gray, there's just too much gray on this album overall for me to really at least get as into it as I was their last album. So still an okay record, a record that Thrice fans can at least get down on, but not their most exciting release by any means. How about you?
And you know what? I might actually be even a little cooler on them, because I'm giving this a very strong 6 out of 10, because again, I get the appeal. It is more cohesive than I think their last album is, but the high points are not as strong. I get the feeling that a lot of this atmospheric sound, especially the heavy leverage and more of the post-rock vibes, is going to sound very dated coming out of mainstream rock in probably the next, 2 to 3 years. It feels very much of its time, even with some of the lyrical subject matter, which won't be delved into the same depth. But again, for Thrice fans, I can't see this standing out. Yeah,
I mean, and like you say, this is an album it does a lot of the post-rock, a lot of the atmospheric stuff. That is something that a lot of bands have been doing lately. Granted, to much less effect. I will give them credit for at least doing that kind of thing well here. Like, we don't need to be reminded of some of the other bands that have been, as I've been putting it lately, have been devoured by the Imagine Dragon. Thankfully, it's not one of those records, but yeah, like you say, in at least 2, 3, 4 years' time, we're going to be looking back on this record, and it's going to feel very dated, and it sucks because this album feels like it didn't have to be that way, but
yeah.
Eh.
At the same time, it's I wouldn't call this their worst album.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not by any means. Still a solid record, but just solid.
Yeah,
just solid.
So, all right, Crash, where can they find you?
You guys can find me at Rock Critic on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, pretty much anywhere you want to search. I of course host The Rock Critic on YouTube.
Great content. Check it out.
Oh, thank you. I do much the same. I do new release reviews, stuff on classic rock, other various things like top 10s, retrospectives. I'm working on the next entry in my How to Get Into series for Rush, which is something I'm really looking forward to, because Rush is my favorite band. I'm also not looking forward to this because Rush's discography is huge and intimidating and difficult, and oh my god, that's going to be a hell of a script to write.
And then you get the fans.
Then you get the fans, too! Oh, that'll be a wonderful little ocean to wade through. But
I'm Canadian. I can rip on Rush fans just like anybody else can. So.
See, if anybody, you've got more cred than I do there. So,
well, have fun with the 2112 comments. I'll just warning you with that one. That'll be fun.
Dude, I know, but I'm looking. I've been a Rush fan since I was like 13. I think I can handle this.
All right, good luck to you there. In the meantime, though, if you want to like and subscribe to the both of us, links down below. We'd be more than grateful for that. Got the poll up there. I'm curious where the increasingly fragmented fandom of Thrice falls on this.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting poll to pull up once that finally sits through. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but if you want to actually buy the record or stream the record, links are also down there below. And hey, if you guys want to get involved in helping support either of us, we both have Patreons, where, at least for me, you have to get some impact on my schedule, because 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Want to see the schedule? It's posted on my Instagram, link down there below. Help you guys check it out. But in the meantime, definitely go subscribe to Crash. He puts out a lot of great content. I've been a fan of his for a couple of years now. Really enjoyed a lot of his top 10s. The guy's got a lot more wit and humor, puts a ton of work into his videos. I definitely want you guys... he should be bigger than he is.
Oh, you kiss ass.
No. It's fucking true.
No, thank you. I sincerely appreciate that. That's very kind of you to say.
But until next time for the both of us, I'm Mark.
I'm Crash.
And until then, we'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.